Do you think you had an advantage or disadvantage by being through the system first?
I think it was both because my advantage is that I was able to connect with the kids in a really unique way because they come at this like, you don't know me, you don't know my life, like you can't even begin, you haven't been in my shoes. And I would just be like, haven't I though?
And I wrote the book about it. Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce to you Miss Ashley-Rhodes Courter. She is the author of Three Little Words and Three More Words is her second book. Thank you again for joining us for our talk today. Enjoy.
Something I found to be interesting about my story is that when I was younger and growing up, everyone was like, oh, good for you, Ashley. Oh, we'll have her speak at our event. Oh, your story's so powerful. Oh, but once I became an adult, there are different legal ramifications and implications of my story. There are, I had caseworkers that were arrested for falsifying records, arrested on drug charges. There are some very unflattering elements of my story. Mm-hmm. I can only tell the story that I experienced. And admittedly, my story is a representation of some of the darker sides of the child welfare system. And so I think when caseworkers or licensing professionals or anyone involved in the field, they would come to our home, they would either be really excited or like, oh, we have to deal with these people. And so I think because, especially my first book was already out before we started fostering, so people either had kind of heard of our story or not, but it wasn't always a positive thing. Sometimes people forget or don't realize that my book started when I was a teenager, and my first book came out in 2008, yeah. Which by publishing standards, it's like a dinosaur.
Yeah.
It's actually shocking that it's even still in print because, books just cycle. So you're an author, like books cycle so quickly. And so there was a lot of, oh, you're doing this for publicity or for money, or, that it was a big shift for me going from, oh, thank you for your story, you're so encouraging, to, oh, you're just doing this because you want to sell more books. So I guess my book and my story was really rooted for me in my advocacy work, and it doesn't pay the bills. That's not a tremendously lucrative source of income for us. That's why I do like the speaking and the writing, and I'm a social worker and a therapist. So that's why I do the 12 different things. Trust me, if the book was the golden ticket to the chocolate factory, delightful, but that's not reality. But because my story has become so public, there were either very positive responses to that or incredibly, sometimes viciously negative responses. So that was something that I had to kind of balance. But you may have experienced similar elements because you are also so publicly out there. And I think with that comes the help and the people that reach out and are like, thank you, I thought I was the only one.
Right.
You get that, but there's also some negative that can come with being so open.
I get the pushback of, oh, you already know that, you must know this, you wrote the book on it, you're like a thing, and people distance and they forget that I'm still me. Like, I'm still this awkward redhead lady that I only know up to what I know, and so I only know how to like live with an 11-year-old. I don't know what's coming. I don't know what's coming. I know it's getting stinkier and more hormonal, but they forget, like, okay, yeah, but that, first of all, the book is 5 years old. I just held on to it for a while. I held on to it in my heart, held on to it in my head. I wanted to make sure my son had a part in it because I really didn't feel right about writing his story. It's my story, my perspective of going through this, and he added in, he wrote parts of each chapter. So I wanted to wait for that. But still, I'm like, I'm not an expert and I'm not perfect. And I didn't write a book on how to do anything right. I failed constantly and I'm still failing. And they forget that.
And even though we have books and like, oh, there's periods in the book and there's an ending to the book, our lives are still moving, changing. And even the things that I wrote about then, it was almost, especially nonfiction like ours, it's like, that's not that's not the end of the story. And
Right.
even things we wrote about then have changed. Relationships have
Right.
changed. People have evolved and developed. And
I am not that crazy lady anymore. Slightly, but not
well,
fully.
but I think that's something people, we're such a consumer society now. And it's like, oh, you binge watch your show. And that was like, it's like, this is not fiction.
Right.
This is like a reality, live action, continuing, evolving. We're at 8, 8, 7, and 5 right now. I will be calling you like, so tell me about that 11, because nothing. And I think that's it. True is that, oh, well, you must have everything figured out. No way. Are you kidding me? Our it's like you make plans and then get laughed at, because our adopted kiddo is blindsiding us in the most remarkable ways. And here I am like, oh, I grew up in foster care. I had all these
Right.
foster kids. And then you just get this kiddo who you love unconditionally, but holy kazongas, like, this one's new. So even, I mean, I have been involved in the child welfare system since I was like, quite literally my entire life.
Yeah.
Like my birth mother was a single teenage mom living in a group home and foster care herself when she got pregnant with me. So like foster care, adoption, child welfare, that has been the entirety of my life. And yet, even as, I have a master's degree in social work, like
Right.
both sides of all of this, and our kid is still, all of them are throwing whammies at us
Yeah.
that I never saw coming and I don't know how to deal with. And so there are no full masters of the game. And even of the professionals, like, I mean, I make all the phone calls. I don't take no for an answer. If there's a resource or a person, like, I will
Right.
go to a conference and I will stalk that keynote speaker for their expertise.
Yes.
I am just like a determined mama bear. But even there is still just so much that I don't know and need to learn and need help with. And that's why it's just so incredible to have these systems of support that even in your darkest days, you know that you are not alone in this, and that there are some traumas and things that happen. Like, this is not rainbows and sunshine. This is not happily ever after. This is a work in progress constantly.
But with finding supports, do you ever feel like, okay, since I'm a somebody, like it's harder to ask for help because of being a somebody?
I too have stayed away from really public forums. I keep my inner circle very small,
Right.
and really vet professionals. One of the biggest issues that I have is going into a service provider, especially because with our adopted kiddo, we have Medicaid. So adopted kids, you maintain the state Medicaid, which in some realms is great, because let's say you get cancer. I mean, we're talking like big stuff.
Right.
You're covered. And I mean, frankly, that's better coverage than our biological kiddos have. But on the other end, if you live in a rural area, we live in a big city, so that's helpful, but access to Medicaid providers is really challenging.
Right. You might
More and
have
more.
one that you can go to, period.
Exactly. And if you are in the know, or you just research like crazy, or you're kind of like the mamas like us, you know the shortcomings of some of these providers. And so what do you do when you have kind of inside information about the providers and the places that everyone's like, oh, we'll just do this. Oh, have you heard of such and such? And then you just happen to know that they're like embezzling criminals. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So stuff like that is definitely challenging. It's like almost the more you know, the smaller your opportunities for just respite or talking. And so it's definitely not something you want. There's a fine line of talking about this stuff openly and admitting that families are struggling,
Right.
and also advocating for more supports and services. I think that's something that is needed universally, regardless of the individual problems that we're having. Mental health awareness in our country as a whole is very lacking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of a platform that I've shifted to in a slight way, is just making mental health and services for families more accessible to all families, regardless of foster care and adoption, because there is such a need. I think those who have fostered or adopted or experienced these kinds of adversities maybe will have more candidates than the more typical family to access some of these
Now,
services.
now they will. So I adopted in California, and it was in a time where medical care was optional. Like we were required to take the kid to a doctor immediately. After that, nothing. So as long as you get them to their first round of appointments, you still have options unless the doctor's really enforcing, like they really, really need this program or surgery or medication. You could opt to not really take care of the kid. And I didn't do that. We ended up maybe overkilling it. But when I moved here to Arizona, Arizona has a law that provides all of the mental health care to the kids immediately. Like
And it's
on day
quality.
one. Yeah, on day one, you can go see a therapist because day one, they're removed. They're already traumatized. There's all of these things. It's automatic. And then a law just passed in January, I think, that removed the cap for mental health. And so now these kids can just a la carte whatever they need. And for me, I was like, wait a second. Why isn't it like that everywhere immediately?
Right. Well, and even as a mental health provider, our agency does accept Medicaid and insurances because our whole purpose for existing is to bridge those service gaps and get quality services to the kids who would otherwise not have access to them. But I mean, fighting with Medicaid is like, it's exhausting and it's a full time. So I get to see this as both a desperate parent needing quality services
Right.
for our kids, but also as a service provider who, like, I get why people don't bother or don't accept it. And the idea that an insurance company can say, oh, you don't need that, or, oh, we're not going to recognize play therapy or music therapy. I mean,
Mhm.
we work with so many kids that that's
But
the
what do you
only
do if they're not verbal? That was the
exact
only
bingo,
option for my son until
bingo,
this year.
bingo. And so people just don't understand these nuances and they're like, oh, well, oh, it's just too expensive. Well, frankly, these kids are expensive, but they need
Mhm.
this, they need creative strategies. They
Right.
need care. And so I think it's great. We're not quite as progressive yet in the South. There's still some work to be done, but I think that's a great move in an awesome direction. And I hope that more parents from all arenas will start to advocate more for services, for mental health services. More and more kids are being diagnosed on the spectrum, and we have just got to have supports for families. And I think it really starts with not having these arbitrary rules with, oh, you grew up in foster care and were beaten and starved and all of these things. Let's give you 8 sessions of talk therapy and you're going to
Mm-mm,
be just
mm-mm,
fine.
mm-mm.
This is a lifelong
Right.
journey. So the idea that, oh, 8 sessions, like, give me a
Yeah.
break. So it's great that you don't have caps. Use it.
Yeah. I've actually wondered because we adopted when he was 7, so he was older. So he already had 7 years of, compounded trauma and complex traumas and all that. And we've had him for 6 years, and kind of like the dating rule, however long you dated, wait that period. And then I think, okay, he's really getting older. He's really getting more mature. And I wonder if maybe I just release it to God and say, hey, I might not see the end of this journey. I might be in this and with all the therapies and with all the attachment work and all of this. And then he moves. Maybe he goes to college. I don't know, gets married. And maybe down the line, someone else will see the fruit. Like in my head, there's so much that I thought, oh, in such a short period of time, or maybe we tried this therapy and that therapy and this thing and this pill, and then everything will be better and we'll get to this point. I don't know what this point is in my head, but I've really started to come to a place of surrender of, this really is a lifetime. And I might not see the end of it, but someone else will. And I'm doing the work. But
Yes.
there will be a point
Yeah.
someday.
Well, and this is not my wisdom, but I think I was at a conference, but they said that we are planting the trees, but we'll never sit under its shade. So we are planting
Wow.
these trees knowing that it's going to take a long time for this tree to grow. So we know that we aren't going to be sitting in its shade,
Mm.
but it's going to be there for someone else. And the best thing that we can do is not be hard on ourselves. Parents, you are not failing.
Mm-hmm.
And doing the best that you can is all that you can. Like
Yeah.
that's all you can do. And just imagine how much more compromised these young people would or could be without your positive intervention.
Right.
Every grain of kindness that you show these kiddos, every bit of normalcy they're able to experience, it's cumulative. Just like trauma is cumulative, so are these positive memories. And these kids wouldn't stand even a remote chance had it not been for what you're able to provide. Because if they've never experienced joy or happiness or a full tummy or contentment, they don't even know how to aspire to emotions and feelings that they've never had. So that's something that's been useful for me as an adult, because trauma doesn't go away, even in
Right.
my adult life. I'm now 34. I think 34. I don't know. I was born in
I
85.
think we are actually the same age.
Okay, whatever we are. I was born in 85. By my kids think I'm ancient, so whatever I am. I'm in my 30s, and I still deal with all of the issues from the past, and then having stuff resurge in my marriage, in childbirth. I mean, trauma creeps up in unexpected places and unexpected times. And so just knowing that this is the long game. And
Right.
I know that even though I'm struggling, I've experienced what it is to be happy and content. So when my own mind starts to go in these darker directions, I can even you can't help how you feel, you can't help what you're thinking, but you can control what you do. And so I because I've experienced so much positive and so much joy in my life, when that darkness comes in, it's heavy and it's hard and it's unpleasant,
Right.
but I have this little spark in my mind that I know it'll pass. I know it can get better. I've experienced better. I've seen better. This is my trauma talking. And sometimes I have to give into it. I might have to sleep it off for the afternoon. I might have to ask my husband. I'll wake up and say, "Hey husband, I'm warning you, I'm feeling like a major B word today." I can just feel that chemically something is off.
Yeah.
So what I do is, like, I have really open communication with my husband. And so he knows if I'm having an off day, it's going to happen. And it can be all consuming, and that's okay. Because at least, thank goodness, I was eventually adopted. So I got to see what a healthy marriage looked like. I got to experience what it means to have really strong women in my life who had a voice and didn't have to use their bodies to get ahead, who were able to instill these really positive elements. And those are those safety nets and these tokens of strength that I use in my darkest times. But if kids never have that and never experience it, they don't know how to pull themselves out again. And so that's something that I'll always know. There are certain organic traumas, brain chemistry, things that we can't help, we may not be able to fix, and you're not going to save every kid.
Yeah.
You're not every adoption works out in the traditional sense, but there is no amount of love and compassion and understanding and effort. There is no amount of effort that will ever harm a child. And so when you put forth that effort, it's not wasted. The picture may not look as you expected it to look, or as, "Oh, well, I saw so-and-so on Instagram. Adoption looks so cute and fun." No, do not foster or
That
adopt.
must not be mine.
Holy cannoli. No, that's actually a thing now. Like, people are like, "Oh, I want to be like Insta famous, I'm going to foster adopt." No, you and I have published, but we have done so for a purpose. This is not for fame. This is not for money, because you are not going to get rich and famous talking about child welfare issues. Even like on the speaking circuit, I'm constantly being told, like, "Oh, well, you need to broaden your message. Don't pigeonhole yourself. Like, you need to have a much more broad niche." It's like, child welfare, I have never met anyone who works in education, child welfare, that's like, obviously I do it for that fat paycheck. you know, just make sure that you are truly pure of heart, and that you are approaching this with open eyes, open hearts, no expectations. No expectations. You are not rescuing these kids. You are not going to be a savior. You have to keep your personal biases and experiences in check, and just like you said, I love that. Surrender to the process and know that it's not going to be perfect. And sometimes, you know, I've worked with families that are like, their goal is like, if the kid doesn't end up in jail, like that's their
Ta-da!
threshold.
Right.
And that's great. That's
Right.
an awesome goal. You know, we're not talking college. It's going to be very different. And, you know, sometimes it's like, I'm not going to have to clean up poop off the floor this week. I mean, you set that bar where it needs to be.
Right.
And if you have a special needs kiddo who doesn't have a bathroom accident in a week, like, woohoo, you know?
Right.
And that's okay. You can be the finest expert in the world on something and still struggle, because you got two mamas here who have put in the time and the energy and the research and the life experience, and we're still going to have major hiccups and bumps in the road. And that's why we can turn energy to awareness and public policy, and trying to use our adverse experiences, sometimes very hard, negative experiences, to hopefully do something positive.
I wonder if God, in his infinite wisdom, is like, okay, you think you have it all together. Let me give you a child. And now you know why I do the things I do. And now you know why I feel the things I feel. And I'm doing this Bible study on Saturday mornings of Proverbs. And so I'm just going through the Proverbs. We go really slow because every single word is like, whew. And I just feel like, oh man, I get it. God gives us timeouts. Like there's a story where Moses rescues all the people from the Pharaoh, and it's like, yay, but the story's not over, because then Moses starts whining, and God's like, well, now you get to wander in the desert for 40 years. And I just go, that was kind of mean. But also I hear my son whining. I go, wander for another 5 minutes. And I just think God loves us so much. And my son asked me the other day, very recently, which is heartbreaking because we've been through so much for so long, but he was really bad. Okay. Had like lots of tantrums. I don't know if he just missed a pill. I don't know. But he said, as I was tucking him in at bed, and he said, Mom, why haven't you gotten rid of me yet? And I said, oh my gosh.
Even after all this time.
Yeah. After all this time, and we are legally a family and all this. And I said, oh honey, I cannot do that. There's not like
my mom, my adopted mom, my parents are Phil and Gay Courter, amazing people. And she shared a similar memory. It was 5 years after my adoption had been finalized. We were having some conversation about something, and I was like, oh, well, if I did such and such, would you send me back? So this is years after I had been officially adopted. I still have this notion that I could be sent back at any point. Mm-hmm. And so that is a very poignant and very real thing, is that this is, and this may be discouraging to some families, but I'll be perfectly honest. I think my deepest level of appreciation and understanding of my family, adoption, the whole shabam, was when I went away to college, because I was 12 when I was adopted. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, this is a time in your life where you're forming your own identity and you're like wanting to fly the nest or see with your friends. But I was being forced to like basically start an infancy with a new family. And when I was away at college, I had people show up for parents' weekend, and I had people call and like be present when they didn't have to be. Yeah. You know, I think even when I was adopted, I was always very suspicious. I'm like, well, you're just getting paid for this, or oh, that's just your job, or you can't possibly really care about me. But when I was away at college and I had somewhere to go, when my dorms closed for spring break and Thanksgiving and Christmas and, you know, all of this stuff, I'm like, oh, that's what family is. Right. Like, that's what this really, like, and that wasn't until I went away to college. So again, that could be extremely discouraging to families, but it's like, that was my aha, is having a family. Family are people who are going to be there when they don't have to be.
Right.
And
right.
that was,
it's hard and you're still there. It's hard and you still love them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was the first time that I was willing to kind of accept help. Like I would call my mom and I'm like, hey, can you make eggs in a microwave?
Yes. Yes.
And she's like, just don't put it in tinfoil. And I was like, oh, wait. And I run. So like the running joke in my family is that if I hadn't been adopted, like my freshman dorm may not be standing as it is to this day. It's someone to teach you life skills. I mean, all of the things, but it will not come in the package that you expect. Sometimes it is going to be years before you get that phone call. And now my mother does nothing but laugh in my face on the daily, because now I have 3 kids who are dishing out every bit of everything that I mean, she just, oh, you have food issues with your kids? Ha ha ha. What's it feel like? So she's having quite the time as a grandmother of foster and adopted and kiddos. I mean, it's just such a hoot.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Your wisdom is on point. Your stories are hilarious. You are hilarious. And I feel like you're like my Florida twin,
I love
and
it.
so cute. Ashley, I really enjoyed hearing all about how this is a long game and it hurts, but it's still worth it. And things can be hard, but you're still in it. And how there is a refreshing every single day, and just communicating with your family and the spirit of togetherness, and knowing that in the future, family is still family. Like, that's just redefining what family means.
Which is
Oh,
not DNA. Family is not DNA.
right. Family is love, it's relationship, it's time, it's investment, and not a moment is wasted. And I love it so much. If anybody wants to hear more from you or be your friend like I am, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I am a real life human being. Most of my social media, what are they called? Handles. It's Rhodes Courter. So just my last name with no hyphen. And then Rhodes-Courter.com is my website, or sustainablefamilyservices.com if you're interested in finding more resources for direct services in your community.
Again, if you want to learn more about Ashley, I will put her information in the commentary or in the notes so you can get to her website and see where she's at on all the socials. Bye, everyone.